You just have to keep going. You have to want it enough to wake up tomorrow and do the same thing over.
This was me being a hustler.
The only way that I've gotten to this point in my life is to try to treat people the way I want to be treated.
Welcome to Ground Zero Growth with your host, Sam Sapp, owner of Lockbon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ground Zero Growth. I'm joined today with my good friend, Paul Abugattas. How are you doing today, Paul?
Great, Sam. Thank you. And appreciate
Now, I
being
got to ask, how did I do with the last name? Because I'm going to be honest, I kind of just flowed into it.
You did perfectly fine. Everybody hits it a little different, but it's Abugattas.
Oh, it sounds like I got it.
Yeah.
And you're with DCA Outdoor, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and I want to hear, and you're originally from, we're just diving in on all sorts of odd directions, but the last name, your family, you're originally from Peru, correct?
Yeah, my family's from Peru. I'm the younger son of two sons, and my parents both met in Washington, D.C. They're first generation immigrants. They came to go to college in D.C. They met there as part of the Peruvian community and had my brother. He was born in the U.S. and then my mom went back to Peru to see her dad, who was having some health concerns, and she was pregnant at the time. And she didn't get to fly back on time, so I was born in Peru. So my brother was born here, and I was born in Peru. But I was back in the U.S. probably. I think the story is like 6 months in. So I came back fairly young, and have never been back. It's part of one of the things I want to do, but have never been back.
I don't know, that's exciting to me. And then, yeah. And I think we talked about too. I was originally born in Turkey, but man, I wasn't even like a year before we were back here. So, and to your point, it's kind of always been a bit of an agenda item for me as well, to go and visit at some point.
Yeah,
Because
my dad did a lot of traveling and adventuring in Peru, and my mom has always told me about all the beautiful places in Peru. And as I was growing up, our cousins came here and moved here, and my aunts and uncles, and so I got to hear a lot about the country. And now a lot of people make that trek to Machu Picchu, and it's a regular travel point. A lot of my coworkers have, and I've just not done it. I've not been able to make the time or find the time, and that's all on me. But it is on my list of things to do, maybe even before the end of the year. So hopefully I can pull that off.
that's good. Let's kind of talk a little bit more about that, if you don't mind, because I noticed the same thing for me personally. Like, is it literally just, there's never been a good moment, or is it? So for me, I mean, I've started to adopt this thing where if me and my wife, like, we should do something or whatever, if it stops there, then it's like it stops there. But if 3 or 4 or 5 times, I'll normally kind of look at her and be like, okay, where are we putting it on the calendar? And are we ordering the tickets today? And it seems like whatever that is, for me, that's what moves the needle. But it's an odd thing to talk. It took me forever for that to work for me.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest impediment to the travel was that I've always been a bit of a workaholic and didn't make enough time to do meaningful travel. I've been out of the country once, just a few years ago. I ended up going to Amsterdam, to the Netherlands on a business trip, actually. And so I'd say the big impediment to making the time is just been that I've always been going hard, whatever business I've been in, and didn't find the time or made the time. My dad has some great memories in Peru and has traveled back to Peru in the last handful of years. He was a mountain climber when he was very young. He wrote a book about his adventures in Peru and climbing and discovering mummies and doing all kinds of crazy adventures out there. And I want to go back and see that with him before he gets to a point where he can't really make that kind of travel. And And I'd say that's probably the big reason is I failed to make time for that. I've been all over the U.S. and traveled over the U.S. and taken vacations here, but just didn't make it happen. I became a U.S. citizen not that many years ago, and for a while there, that was the other piece. I was a naturalized immigrant, and I decided, I'd travel over the U.S. and try and make time for travel to Peru sometime later, and so later keeps becoming later, and you make excuses for not figuring it out, and that's probably where I am.
So, if you don't mind me asking, it's a little off tangent slightly, but I am curious. So, you said you became a natural U.S. citizen in the more recent sort of years, and it's interesting. I've got family member too, where she's been here for forever, and only the last few years, in the same sort of way, has she really taken and passed and become a U.S. citizen. And I've asked her a little bit, but I'm curious as well to hear from you. What's that process kind of look like? And what's a scenario in where, somebody's been here contributing, working for years before going through the process to become a US citizen? Like, is it because my mind goes to, is it that difficult? Is it just that test that we never sit down for? Or
So it's bureaucratic is probably the kindest way to put it. And then there were complications that made it more bureaucratic for me. I didn't realize, this sounds silly, but I didn't realize I was not a U.S. citizen when I was growing up. I just took it for granted that, I went to school as in grade school, went to, high school, and just didn't really put that all together. I was a naturalized citizen, just felt like I was an American. And then you have to register for the draft. You get to the point where you're 18 and going to college, and I realized there were processes that needed to happen for me to be a citizen that were different than what my brother was, who was born here. And that started the process of okay, I need to collect, and my mom did all the work. Really, I give myself starting the process credit, but all years of medical proof that I'd been in the U.S. and one or two documents from every year. You build this big fat portfolio of great school cards or all the materials of where you went to school. And around the time that I wanted to become a U.S. citizen and started the process, I moved to Texas. So I had to move all the paperwork from one complicated bureaucratic place in Washington, D.C., where I was, had grown up outside of Washington, D.C., to Houston, Texas. And then I did that, started the process there, and identified myself as a naturalized citizen who had moved. And then I moved to LA, another great place to go from one immigrant boiling pot of bureaucratic paperwork, Texas to Los Angeles. And then business took me to Miami. And that would be another place where I had to move all the paperwork yet again to Miami. And each time I did that, I encountered some paperwork problems. I remember one time I got I re-upped my green card, and I got my card and it had a different person's picture on it, and my name, and I had to go and start all the paperwork. And all this involves, there is no online at the time. Getting in line and going places and making copies using copy machines, and it frustrated me. And so I ended up in Florida, and
and you
I
say in line and making copies and copy. My mind goes to like the DMV. Is it
yep,
is it safe to
it's
assume
a
that for those of us that haven't been in that line, is it safe to assume that's the person that's greeting us and walking
ev-
us through that
every bit
process?
every bit of the DMV, and maybe a little bit more intense, but yeah, every bit of that. And so I was in Florida, and I ended up moving back to Washington. I actually worked for as a contractor for the federal government, and I still was not a U.S. citizen, which is not an uncommon thing. And I worked on a lot of physical projects. I ended up getting married to an American, and I didn't take the shortcut of trying to just wait till, because I was married to somebody to get that. I wanted to do it myself.
Hmm.
Probably foolishly, my marriage broke up, and I lost that opportunity then. And then I realized, you know what? I really want to travel. I want to leave the country. I had the opportunity with one of the companies I was working with to go overseas and do some buying overseas, and I had limited my ability deep in life to be able to do that. And so I pursued, I doubled down on my efforts. By then, a lot of things had become digital, had become a lot quicker, and I went and was working for Plow and Hearth at the time in Madison, Virginia, outside of Charlottesville, and I got my U.S. citizenship there. And the process at the end was very good. That last 12 months of getting it, the process had become a lot easier. The people that I encountered were so much less bureaucratic. I don't know what the change was. It just felt very different. Maybe I was more mature. I took the test. I went and did the interview. I answered the
Well, and
questions.
where were you again? Because
This
you're mentioning.
I lived in Madison, Virginia, which is
Okay.
just north of Charlottesville, Virginia, about 23 miles north of Virginia, where I
Okay.
still have a house. So that immigration office is pretty small. It is not Miami, it's
Yeah.
not Los Angeles, it's not Houston. And the courthouse there, where I got sworn in, was a great little process with a lot of other immigrants of many different ages. And so the end of the process was a lot easier than the beginning of the process. I was stubborn for a lot of years. I got angry about how bureaucratic it was, and I said, forget it. And then I regretted that a lot for a long time.
Yeah. But, it's also so you've been through this process, right? Which I think it sounds like there were certain moments where you were more serious and certain moments where you were less serious and certain moments where you were like, no, I am serious. I'm going to get it done. And it
Yes.
sounds like it really worked out that you were in a smaller sort of, I mean, it wasn't as regular a thing for them. And so they a little bit more white glove treatment perhaps for, because it's interesting to me. I mean, Houston, Texas, politically, and I'm not trying to make it political, but I think there's a lot to be gleaned from this line of questioning. Houston, Texas, politically, is a much different scene than Los Angeles, California. And then through a time period, you're going through different administrations as well. From the bureaucracy behind it, what did you ever notice any sort of like differences, any improvements in the systems or lack thereof, or was it
No,
just convoluted start to finish kind of a thing?
no. I would say, and remember, well, not remember, but in my case, when I was in Houston, I was in my early 20s. So I was very glib about being bothered in any processes and paperwork. But I never felt any change in any in any political climate from place to place and city to city that I was going. I didn't feel, there were various administrations over the course of that many years, both Republican and Democrat, but I didn't feel it. It just felt like the machine was clogged up, and it was a
Hmm.
very sticky, slow moving, wait in the mail, you get your appointment. Okay, you should hear in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, or wait till you get this, and then you can fill the next form out, and that will be another 2 3 months or something. It felt like that, but not political at all. I never felt that.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Well, that's helpful. I think it's either helpful or depressing in my mind. I mean, it's on one hand not political, so that's kind of cool. On the other hand, it's like it sounds like it's just an all around convoluted, the
It,
bureaucratic. They could use some work.
It's certain. I know it can use some work to hear it now from people who are trying to go through the process correctly. Legal
Yeah.
immigration. That it's still painful process, and it shouldn't be that painful of a process. But it is definitely better than it was, I think, in the 90s and the early 2000s, where it was just a mess.
Well, and it's really wild to me to think about the world that you've described, which makes perfect sense. Which is, I went to grade school, I went to high school, you signed up for the draft, I signed up for the draft. These are very like, depending on the scenario, you know, there's a world where. So when did you figure out? When was the aha moment that it's like, okay, I guess I'm not a citizen, like my brother's a citizen? Like
It it uh,
when was
it
that?
it dawned on me as I was turning 18 and realized, wait, I can't vote. And that was another one of those things where I was
At the
like, wow.
DMV?
I Yes, and talking to my parents and going, hey, I'm going to
Oh.
register for the draft, and I was applying to colleges, and they're like, hey, this is something you need to take care of. You need to take care of. And that's sort of that process going. I will say, just to thinking about what you said before, I probably would not have been as motivated to get my U.S. citizenship. I could have gone and done some travel with my Peruvian passport, if it wasn't for wanting to travel with my dad and wanting to do some work travel, but mostly my dad. That motivation there was like, okay, I need to fix this. I need to get this taken care of. I thought about it when I was working for the government for that little stint, but it never really affected any of the projects that I worked on. If there were top secret projects that at some point would have become available to me, that would have probably impacted that as a foreign national, but it never became an issue. There were places where I worked at that had higher clearance, but I never had any issues accessing those places because of the contract that I worked under. So that was the only time I didn't work in retail, is that very short stint that I worked as a government contractor.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's fascinating. All right. I'm trying to think exactly where we kind of dive in from there. So tell me about, so we talked then about you kind of peppered in some of your career transitions in the sort of immigration process, but now let's kind of more formally dive into, so as you're navigating this, right, in the period right around end of high school where you're like, hey, I'm going to register to vote, I'm going to register for the draft. What's kind, and by the way, you're getting thrown that curveball. Where are you at geographically again? It sounds like Washington, if I recall.
So we lived we when I was growing up and we were young, we lived in Washington D.C., and then my parents moved across the river to Northern Virginia. So I would be Arlington, Virginia, right there. It's probably 7 miles from D.C. Part of that greater Washington D.C., but on the Virginia side. So I went to high school there, went to grade school. We moved to a couple places in Arlington over that period of time. And when I was 16 years old, or probably a little bit younger than that, I started working in retail. Just typical of a lot of my friends getting the part-time job somewhere, and I would work in a drugstore probably for about 3 or 4 years, and got the retail bug there. And I have not
Hmm.
left retail as an industry since that time. I started part-time, ended up getting handed the keys to the store and opening and closing like a lot of other part-time folks and young people. They gave me more responsibility than I probably should have had at the time, and I continued to work a lot of hours, even though I was also still going to high school at the time. And learned a lot about retail from people who treated me like an adult for
Hmm.
a long period of time. Um, After a few years of working at drugstore, I was going to go to college, and I decided I would focus on college. And I ended up getting accepted and going to George Washington University. So I still lived in Arlington, and I lived at home, but my college would have been in DC. So I could take the metro and take the train and go to the college. And I decided to change to another retail area to have a part-time job after I'd started college and was taking a few courses. and that entered me into Crown Books Corporation. So I worked for the third largest book chain in the U.S. at the time. It was Barnes and Noble, Borders, and Crown Books would have been third. Crown Books was part of the half retail empire. They owned Dart Drug, Track Auto, the wine company. They owned a real estate company. So I worked for Crown Books part time and was going to college full time, and I just loved it. I continued to have that retail bug. Before you knew it, I was the assistant manager of the largest bookstore or the highest volume bookstore that we had on our chain. They're in McLean, Virginia, where a lot of celebrity and high profile authors would come to sign their books. And I eventually ended up becoming manager of that store after 2 years in college. I was running that place. You trying to jump in there?
Yeah, no. Well, there's a couple things I really want to chime into, if you don't mind. So the first one is really kind of, well, the first major experience where you describe, and it resonates with me, where you said treated like an adult. And I remember, I mean, a few different career experiences, but the ones I've always enjoyed the absolute most, that I got the most energy out of, were the ones that were like, hey, Sam, here's the problem. You got to rise to the occasion, or not, and not's a problem. Go. Versus the ones that didn't treat me as an adult. It was, there was a lot of hand holding and a lot of, it felt like spanking when I got things wrong, almost, kind of, right? And so it's an interesting thing. And I wish I had a question further there, but it's almost like that's a fascinating notion, because your A player wants to be treated like an adult, right? And then the more you do that, right, the more they rise to the occasion, the more you rise to the occasion, right?
There were plenty of people that were hired in that drugstore environment that were just there to bring the cash register, punch in and out, and leave. But I worked with somebody who, if you asked him questions, he'd stop and tell you why. And I asked him a lot of questions about, why does this process work this way? Why are we doing it this way? Why don't we do it that way? Or being the person who would be like, hey, here's this job. The person in that department didn't come in, so you go over there. So then you'd end up doing the truck unloading or the photography department, or why don't you jump behind the counter at the pharmacy? I mean, as I said, there were probably areas that I had no right being involved in, but I was treated with respect and given more responsibility. And he talked to me about financial statements, and I remember him very well. I bumped into him many years later and told him that he had influenced my career, because he had given me those that time and that opportunity. And I found that also carried too into Crown Books. I was a very, very young person at Crown Books when they gave me that store, and the district manager there, a woman I worked with, took the time to explain business to me, explain how to do things from a merchandising standpoint. She's probably the first real person to explain to me a true P&L, a profit and loss statement. And I started going to meetings where my peer group was probably 20 to 30 years older than me. The other store managers. I became the youngest district manager, and that would be the opportunity that took me actually out of college and out of Virginia and Washington, D.C., and moved me to Texas, that first move.
She showed you how a profit and loss state. How old are you at this point?
I would say I was 20, maybe 19. I'd have to figure out the years, but yeah.
Did you realize, like,
looking at what
I didn't see a profit and loss statement till maybe these last 8 years or whatever as part of business, which still transparently is just a wild notion to me and makes me sound ignorant, but I'm willing to go out on a limb there. Did you, but I don't know if mine is necessarily the most abnormal either. did you ever take for granted that you knew what a profit and loss statement was? Like, did you realize while she's showing you the weight of that, or
It clicked. And I don't know if it's me or maybe other people wouldn't have found it as fascinating. But I'm like, okay, well, we open and close. We sell these things. These people come in and give us services. And well, how does it? What are we doing? Okay, I don't know if we're doing okay. If we have a $10,000 day, and then the next Saturday it's a $3,000 day, is that a tragedy? How do we plan that? It just clicked. And I was interested and curious, and the more that I asked, people kept sharing. And along the way, that seems to have been something that I've been blessed with, having people that would slow down and talk to me about stuff. I've worked with a handful of CFOs in the last 20 years that you think you know how you to read P&L. Okay. I remember how I thought to read a P&L, and then you have 13 P&Ls or 30 P&Ls, and how do you manage P&Ls together? You can read them, but how do you make a difference on this line down here? How do you move a number on a P&L? That's cool. Someone took the time to explain that to me, or to share their experiences with it at a much higher level later in my career. And I just have continuously been curious, wanting to learn, and I've shared that. I have brought that attitude of being very transparent. I've only worked in one publicly traded company, but where we had to be careful about what kind of information we were sharing. Otherwise, I worked for entrepreneurs or smaller businesses or mid-sized businesses where I could share a P&L with a part-timer, a buyer, a store manager, a district manager, and they have all really appreciated it, not forgotten how that felt on my end. And it was important for me to find future opportunities. So I feel like it's important for me to do the same and pay that back to other people. As long as they're curious, as long as they want to learn, I will make the time. And I like talking about it, so that helps too.
well, and I mean, I love this early exposure because just in the main, how valuable is that document in general to me? Like, so my mind has always kind of worked like a profit and loss statement, just in my general teachings from my dad, where it's like, you've got your money that comes in, you've got the money that goes out. That should be less than the money that comes in. You should have some savings in there. And then what's left down at the bottom is what you've got to go blow on whatever. Um, but then the first time you see a profit and loss, you're kind of like, oh, that's a beautiful representation of my mind, and it's kind of one of those things where you'd think more people would know what it was than
There,
do.
there's so
Just
many
because it's
nuances to it.
business.
It is the ultimate report card. So if you have 30 locations and you have 30 P&Ls, that is the ultimate report card. But there are nuances. If you're running a business there in Virginia and you're running a business in New Jersey and you're looking at different ratios of expenses, they may not be graded the same because of a different real estate deal, a different overhead because you have a different labor cost. So there are nuances to reading a P&L statement, not just top line, bottom line, that they're affected by the type of business. Gross margin is different here than it has been in other businesses I've run. So you learn that. I mean, once you know how to read one, it helps you, and you use it as the ultimate report card, as you're indicating, and that's how I used it. But then there is some nuance in it, saying, okay, in a portfolio of stores, maybe you grade a couple on a curve because they serve a different purpose. They're an inner city store, or they're a store that's in a different type of shopping center, and it's serving a different purpose.
Hmm. Yeah. So, okay, you have early exposure to a profit and loss, and people that are mentoring you through, you're asking the great questions, and I think there's an art form, in my opinion, to a good question. And it's also wrapped around the ability to look silly, right? And not everybody wants to look silly. So they don't ask great questions. So you're asking good questions and you're just getting more and more, and they're, you're showing you a profit and loss, and ultimately you're getting a store. The other question I had in there, that was the other one too, was, so your first store, you said a lot of famous people would come in and do book signings. So then I kind of had a moment of like, what is, and I have to frame this correctly, because I could ask you the most famous person, and I guess that would be by world standards. So if you have that person at the top of your head, that would be one. But then also, I like to ask who's kind of been the most interesting person too that you feel like you've met.
I'll tell you a couple of great experiences. So I was at Crown Books. This was in the McLean store. We also had other stores where there were very crazy book signings. Like I was at our DuPont Circle store when Howard Stern came, and that turned into a wild three-ring circus down there. Howard did bring thousands of people out. But there were a couple of ones that resonated with me. One, we did a Norman Schwarzkopf signing after the Iraq War, and he had come back and he wrote a book, and we had a book signing that brought in just a ton of people, military and civilians, and big line went out the store into the parking lot, wrapped around the parking lots a couple of times. And during the course of the signing, he's got Secret Service with him. He's got some other, we've got some local police officers there. Someone called in a bomb threat. And they find me. I'm moving around the store trying to keep things going,
And who is the person again? Remind me. I'm sorry.
Norman Schwarzkopf.
Norman Schwarzkopf.
General
Okay.
Schwarzkopf. Storeman
Okay.
Norman. And he had he was a celebrity at that point. They had the teddy bear that was made to resemble when people were bringing in the book and other stuff for him to sign. So they call it a bomb threat, and the authority there, I think it was a Secret Service member, grabbed me and said, "Hey, you're in charge. Let's go back here to the table where the general is." And we had stopped the line about 20 feet from him, so they couldn't hear the conversation. And so they get me there with a number of other people, and they say, to the general, "Hey, this bomb threat was called, and we're going to have to, we're calling in the dogs and the fire department." And I'm just listening because I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And he put his pen down, very, general like, put it on the table, and he said, and they said, "Well, we're going to have to stop the signing." And he said, "Well, no one's going to rain on my parade. What are we going to do about this?" And he looked at me, and I'm like, "I have no clue what we're going to do about this." And he's still looking at me, and I'm like, "Well, what can we do?" And he goes, let's finish the signing outside." And the cops are looking at him. The fire department, Secret Service are like, "What? What are you talking about?"
It's like the opposite of what we want to do.
Yeah. And he's like, "No, we're not stopping all the signing. All these people came here for the signing. They want to get their book signed. Let's figure it out." So by then the fire department had come. The fire chief comes up. He shakes hands with the general, who is, royalty. And he says, "Yeah, sure, we can help." So they park his fire truck in the middle of the parking lot, put the spotlights from the fire truck down. We carry a table out, put him in front of the fire department's trucks with the lights around him, and we reversed the line so that people kept their place in line, and we did the book signing in the parking lot. And we were going in and out of the store with shopping carts full of books, and just taking money from people that were coming up and finish the signing in the parking lot. And that charisma that he showed, where he took over the situation and solved the problem, was inspiring to see that. And that was pretty cool. There was another signing I'll tell you.
I also want to talk about his question to you, because you're there in that moment. But I've had situations like that, right? Where, and I'm reading a book now, where he describes instances with George W. Bush where it's almost kind of similar. Like your answer almost doesn't matter. And they're not necessarily asking because they need the answer. They're asking because it's like, what's Paul going to do right now? What kind of person is Paul? And it's like, in whatever answer you give, it's going to, whatever they need to know, they're going to find out in that question.
Being with him in a place like the Situation Room or a war room, and listening to the counsel of people who are qualified to give counsel, other officers, would be really fascinating to see how he creates a room where it's safe to get people's input. The other leaders' input. I think he felt like he was deferring to me, and maybe he thought was also qualified to come up with some kind of alternate plan. I had no clue what I was walking into. I was like, I'm going to see what is going on here with the Secret Service and the general, and it'll all sort itself out. And when he asked me for my input, I didn't have it. I was like, what do you want to do? And he was in control at that point. He was like, okay, if you're giving me the space, I'm taking the space. I'm in charge. Here's what we're doing, and let's pull it off. And I was like, yes, sir. We'll pull it off. Let's do it. And
so what you're indicating is maybe almost out of respect, so to speak. I mean, the Secret Service said you're in charge. It's your store, right? So maybe almost to your point, like you said, deferred out of respect. It's like,
so
look,
there is one point I'll make there. I'll interrupt you. The at one point when we were asked, did we want to keep the signing going, the Secret Service said, you're not in charge. We are not having the signing inside. The bomb squad is on its way. This is done. So we couldn't continue in the store even if we wanted to. They were not going to let the general stay in there. The place was packed with people. If there was a threat, it's their area of operation. We had to go. So they were going to get everybody out of the store, organized quickly, including the general. But there was not going to be we're going to ignore the warning. That was not part of the options for us to say, oh, well, forget it. It's probably nothing. We'll just keep going. No, they weren't going to allow that.
You'll forgive me. I can tell this is going to sit with me because him asking you, it poses all sorts of questions in my mind, because you accurately depict this situation where you're like, I was never going to give an answer. I was never qualified to give an answer. Like, why did he even ask? And that creates a world in my mind where it's like, why did he ask? He had a reason. He seems like a very intelligent person. And you've given some reasons, but I don't know. It seems to me like there's something deeper, perhaps. Anyway, I don't know.
For a guy who's led that many people in that many situations and that many crises in crisis management, this was probably just a nothing to him.
Probably.
Level 1. To me, it was a level 12. Because I was like, oh my God, look at all these people. What are we going to do? To him, it was probably nothing. And so if I wasn't filling the room with a decision, he was going to make the decision and we were going to go with it. And he's probably pretty used to doing that.
Okay, so kind of moving from there, what was really your... That's a lot of fun experiences there.
There was some,
and you've had more. We got to keep going. What was your next role?
Yeah, I have probably over 150 signed books from the various places that I went. So I stayed in the book industry for 10 years with Crown Books.
And you kept a book. That makes sense.
Yep.
You have a book from these folks?
Yep, I have a signed book from all the book signings I've been to, and it was probably 150 signed books in my library back in Virginia. All kinds of people. I remember Jimmy Carter came after being a president, and just a very unassuming, everything you hear about the guy. He wrote a book that was really meditative and religious and faith-based, and he was coming to do a book signing. There were just a ton of people around him. He still had Social Security, the Secret Service with him. And the guy packed his own lunch and he had a sandwich and he went in the back room and he was going to eat his sandwich and he was offering to share it with the staff. One of the just kindest and charismatic in a different way than somebody like, Schwarzkopf. But just, I was very impressed with him. And I know he gets a lot of criticism for being that kind of president, but he was a very kind guy and he was very decent to the staff, which a lot of other authors were not. Well, a lot of people who were prima donnas that came there and didn't give the staff the time of day or didn't sign books for the staff. That was another class act thing, you could tell. When you had people who were coming in and they'd be like, when there's a huge line, I've been signing for an hour and a half. Can I sign some books for the store? Can I sign some books for the staff? Yes. Awesome. And then they take the time to talk to a few of the booksellers and that work for us. That was class act. So that's another one that I remember. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name who is the host of the Tonight Show that was a car aficionado now. God, his name escapes me. He's he's a big car guy, and he was coming he came to do a signing, and there was another huge line, and there were hundreds of people there to see him, and there was the volunteer fire department was halfway back in the line, and they were waiting to get their book signed for him. Jay Leno. I'm sorry, Jay Leno.
You're good. Yeah.
Another guy that I never watched the Tonight Show. I just knew him
Yeah.
as a celebrity. And so there was a huge line in the volunteer fire department, like 6 members were together in line, and they got a call. And so they had to get out of line and leave and go and answer the call. And so they gave their books to the couple that was in front of them, and they got to Jay and they told Jay, hey, the volunteer fire department said, could you sign their books and they'll come back and pick them up or whatever. And he's like, what, really? And he gets his personal assistant and he tells the couple, leave the books with me. And so I didn't realize this till much later. I didn't know what happened. But he finished the signing. He was a class act. He was and he's funny. I mean, Jay Leno is funny, but he is funny. And he got in
That's
his
good.
limousine. He got in his
So even
limo-
offline, he's just funny.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
people were talking to him, and he's quipping with people. I mean, hundreds of people. That has to
Yeah.
be overwhelming. Again, a different type of charisma.
Yeah.
But he got in his limousine after the signing, and he drove to the firehouse, and he delivered the books to those people, and he hung out with them and took pictures with them, and never made a big deal out of it. He didn't tell us he was doing that. He didn't announce it. He just did it because he's a decent human being. And, those little stories. There are all kinds of other stories. I had the guys who had the tigers, the magicians. They got into a spat. We brought an adult tiger to the store, put it in one of the aisles of the books and the cubs. Those two guys would not, Siegfried and Roy, they wouldn't face each other. So they pushed their chairs so that they didn't want to talk to each other. So they were signing the book and then like toss it at the other guy and the other guy would sign it. And I was like, this is strange. But just tons of people and great stories from authors big and small. Dick Francis, Tom Clancy, Dolly Parton, celebrities and authors alike over the years. It was just a great time. And being a book lover and someone who I hadn't explored.
I have to be honest here, Paul. I got to come out. I got to tattle on myself a little bit. When you said you got the retail bug, my mind went to like hospitality. And then when the first time you and I talked, you said that. And when you mentioned it was a bookstore, my mind went to like, nah, that's not anywhere near as chaotic as say a restaurant or, you got in on the ground floor. But now you're describing these book signings and I'm over here like, no, that's chaos. that's with people and lines and bomb threats, probably from people that didn't want the author there for one reason or another. And then I'm sure there were other people that didn't call in bomb threats that didn't want the author there. Maybe they're protesting out front or whatever they're doing. That's
It was
more.
it was exciting. I came to Crown Books at the time as the third largest bookseller when Walden Books and B. Dalton and all the bookstores were about 2,000, 3,000 square feet. The store that I ran, that was a flagship store, was not a big store either. It was probably, I don't know, 6,000 square feet. And so during the time that I was in the book industry, it was the time that the superstore started. That's when you started to see the Barnes and Nobles of 30 to 40,000 square feet, and the Borders of the 20 to 30,000 square feet. They were huge anchors in retail, so they were changing the industry. And we'd always been the discount bookseller. Robert Half, who owned and ran at Crown Books as part of that Half family. He was very famous for being on TV. Books cost too much. That was the tagline. And so what we did, and then he'd stand in the front and pile books, and everything was always on sale. It was always discounted, 10, 20, 30% off. So we were the third chain, and I was in the industry at the time that it was becoming superstore. So I got to ride a lot of store openings, especially when I got to LA, and changing stores that were neighborhood stores from 2 to 3,000 square feet and open 12 to 20 to 15 to 20,000 square foot stores. So that was another level of education and excitement and learning. And everywhere that I went, there was a kind of a different book scene. To be in LA was very different than the political authors that I met on the on the East Coast. There were a lot of East Coast authors, and there are a lot of West Coast authors, and of course, the West Coast is entertainment. So there were, Michael Crichtons and people like that who were actors, and that would have been part of the people that I met on the West Coast. And then there were some things that happened on the West Coast in the book industry that if you were in retail, that would have happened to you anyway. The Glendale quake, the earthquake that damaged bookstores, the riots that happened when I was in LA that closed some of our stores. The race riots that were going on there. And I had a homicide in a store. I was in the first time I had been robbed at the drugstore. There was always shoplifters and people trying to steal things. But I was working at Crown Books in November, and I was out for dinner with some people from our corporate office that had come to visit. And those were days of pagers. So I was carrying my pager, and I got a 911 page, and I got my old flip phone out and called, and it was one of the district managers, and the news feed was showing that there was a homicide, or there was a hostage situation was the announcement at one of our stores in Santa Monica. And I was nothing in LA is close from a drive, so I left the dinner, jumped in my car, called another couple of people in my network. I ran the West Coast out there and got the loss prevention officer, district manager, other managers, and I started driving. And by the time I got there, the place was surrounded by cop cars, and they put tape all around the place, and they still thought the person was in there who had committed the crime. And my staff was over in another little area that were sequestered, being questioned by the police, and I was standing over by myself, waiting for someone to tell me what was going on. I talked to the SWAT team, the cops. Again, really young, very young. And didn't know.
Very young, being 23, 24,
Yep, about 23,
25.
about 23, 24 at that time. Yeah. And not really understanding what to do. There was a crisis that I was in. Didn't know what to
Which
do.
that's 23, 24, and maybe your experience was different, but for me, it was definitely like, that, especially with SWAT and cops and, nobody thinks you're in charge. Nobody thinks you're in charge, and when they show up, it's this overbearing sort of like, "Who put you in charge?" It's like,
Well, I'm
"I don't know,
sure
but
the
we're
image that
still
I
here."
presented when I got there was you can't be in charge. I mean, all the district managers that worked for me were in their 40s, and I would be in my mid 20s. And people were like, "There's no way this guy is in charge," and I probably gave off the vibe like I'm total shock as well. So I was in contact with the corporate office on the East Coast, trying to get some counsel from the CEO and from the HR department. And
Which is a wild thought. The CEO and the HR department don't know what to do.
no,
Right? They don't know what to do. I mean,
we had
hopefully they're
we had
helpful.
we had a legal team that we had on retainer that who knew this happened, right? That jumped in and they were offering some advice on what to do next.
Hmm.
Okay, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to do next, and that was really helpful. And we waited for a long time, and eventually the staff went away, the crowds kind of died down, and the cops had gone into the building, and I had determined that he was never in there. Uh, the situation was that he had walked, the gunman had walked in as a young man, and they thought he was related to a gang. There was an initiation. He walked into the back room during a shift change where somebody was counting out and somebody was counting in. There were three people in that back room: the store manager and two associates, one counting in, one counting out. And in the course of whatever happened in that back room, the manager opened the safe and made a move. Something felt wrong to the gunman or threatening, and he fired and hit the guy in the chest, and also another time when one of the associates tried to run past him that was in there with it and witnessed it. He hit him in the face with a pistol. He's the one who ran through the store and alerted everybody that this was going on, and then everybody panicked and laughed, and then they thought he was still in that store. And so that evening, late into the evening, I was still there. Everybody else was gone. The cops are talking to me. They bring the body out. I saw that, and then
Was
uh,
this someone you knew?
I had not been out there that long, and I knew and had met the manager, but I can't say I developed a relationship with hardly anybody out there at the time
Hmm.
that this happened. And the body came out, and then they said to me, "Well, we've got all the fingerprints. The whole store is trashed." And because the guy, they thought he had left, and they were checking for fingerprints on bookshelves and various parts of the store. And they
So the
said,
forensics team is trashing it?
yeah, the
Hmm.
people with panic had left and dropped stuff and tipped
Sure.
books over, and then the forensic team had come in and they had put that sticky, oily fingerprint dust on everything.
Okay.
Trying to figure out what he had touched: doorknobs, bookcases, the aisle, everything. And this is a big store, a big, beautiful store. And so I'm still trying to process what to do next. And the officer on the scene was explaining to me, "Hey, here's a business card. Call these guys. These are the cleanup team." And so this is a third-party service that exists. Who knew that this is an industry? These two guys show up in hazmat suits. I called them, and they go into the store, and they make it so that they clean up crime scenes where there may be biological matter, and of course, shooting, blood, spatter, and other material was all over that back room. And so I walked in that back room. There was cash had been thrown on the ground in the air, and the whole situation. And they did we just handed it over to them. I remember stepping into that room and not feeling right, and being able to taste the copper, like pennies. I don't know if it was my adrenaline or what it was, but I still remember that. It just didn't, it felt off. And then they went in and they did their thing for about another hour and a half, 2 hours. They put on these lights and the hazmat suits. They bring a barrel out and they walk around everywhere that anywhere there was a speck of blood, they'd take it out and put it in that barrel and it becomes this hazmat. So when I got into the back room the second time after they had turned it over to me, it was just a very surreal, there'll be a case of books on a shelf, and one corner of it, they'd cut the cardboard off of it and left everything else perfectly there because there had been spots of blood on it. It's very strange, and having to figure out what to do in a situation where you're like, okay, can I pick up this money or that? And so we closed the store for a few days. I got counsel from, our attorneys and HR people and our executives. Everybody was very supportive. The community came out and put flowers in the front of the store. We stayed closed for a little bit to try to get counseling for the associates. And it was a tough situation, obviously, much less tough for me than it would be for the coworkers of that young man who was the manager or the family. They lost somebody. But I think I regret that in my professional career. I probably regret that situation the most in the way that I did not engage with the store team as well as I could have. They told me to stay away. The police were talking to them, and I just didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to handle it, and I didn't know how to give empathy, and that was something I regret a lot. It's not being able to figure out how to handle that. And we got robbed like 5 more times the rest of that year. That was in November. And there was just this fate of, we built our stores in large lifestyle centers near highways. And I don't know why they thought there was a lot of money in bookstores, but we got robbed a couple more times.
And you mentioned regret, and it's an interesting thing, and I understand. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's probably not even fair. But you've described scenarios where people are doing little things, class act, which I like that you use that. I feel like that's kind of a lost term a little bit, and it's significant. Um, I use the term stand up guy. And I've had, there was anyway, I won't, we could get back to it, but I had a situation recently where it meant a lot to me. And honestly, I'll give a little credit to you. When we came out to Colonial Gardens, that meant a lot to me too. I don't, but in the situation you're describing, there's no playbook. There's no play. And for as much as it sounds like people really tried to help you through what they could, even then there's still no playbook. And just me thinking through as if I'm in your situation, you have these radical moments later changes that maybe to somebody else aren't radical, but to you, I was at home eating or whatever you were doing, and now I'm at a homicide scene at my store, and now I'm in a crime scene in the back room, and there's blood. Oh no, now there's not blood. You know what I mean? These are just rapid scene changes. And if they were to be condensed into a 30-minute movie, this is a thriller, right? This is boom, 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 boom. And this is happening in real life to you over still a relatively rapid time span in the grand scheme of things. This isn't weeks over, oh, a shooting happened, weeks over, oh, this is a crime scene, weeks over, now it's a clean crime scene, weeks over, okay, how do I counsel the team? How do I get, you know what I mean? So, I mean,
I
some
learned
credit to you here. This is a lot.
I learned there were other crises down the road here. I had one of my stores burned down, and I had to respond to that fire and fly to the store. And on the way there, I picked up one of our facilities guys and put him in my car, and we drove there, and then ended up sleeping in the car the night waiting for. But on the way there, we'd been told that somebody was still in the store. That a off-duty police officer, a woman who was there next door getting an ice cream with her daughter, saw somebody in the store. So that was a big concern driving down. So I'm calling and trying to talk to people. At that point, of course, where technology is much better than we've got cell phones and all that. And then I get a second call on the way down because the drive was like 2 hours to the store from where I live. This was in Williamsburg, Virginia. Where the fire happened, that the roof collapsed and some firemen were in it. And so you can't do anything about it, but the anxiety the pressure that builds and like that, I think what I learned is don't assume that someone knows that you care. Tell them that you care and communicate. So, don't assume that they all feel that they know that you feel bad, but there's some empathy that you're trying to throw off. There's no sign that says that, but you're carrying it when you're in a leadership position. Tell them. And that is very important to call the staff and tell the staff where they stand, what's going on with their store. Are they going to have a job? Tell them, talk to them. Don't assume that somebody else is going to tell them, that some other level of, okay, I'm in charge, but there's a district manager. Be the one. Just do it yourself. Try and do the work of connecting with the associates or family, and then talk to them. And that was something that I didn't do the first time there. I didn't know what to do at that time there. I assumed they knew how I felt. I regret that, and that I could have put myself in uncomfortable situations a lot by showing I cared, and I should have. And that's something you learn. I think it is something you learn.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's yeah, it's only an experience thing, I think, right? Yeah. And yeah, seeing more of other people do it, and then what was it that was so meaningful to you? The people that, I want to sign books for the staff here. And then and to even that moment, you remember that moment, but how many times did that book signer forget, right? And which that's fine. It's not like it was an obligation. And then in their mind, I wonder if they're like, I wish I'd asked, I completely forgot. And then next time they ask, and then you remember that you happen to be that one that's like, in their mind, I remembered this time.
It's not limited to books. It's not limited to retail at all. But I have had some pretty cool moments in other industries where the people who are genuine, that they are class acts, or they just do it every day. That's part of their persona. I remember I ended up back in Texas helping open a Mars Music, another place that I retailed. Now I was in Texas and we were opening a store there, and one of the members of ZZ Top had driven to our store. We had a lot of celebrity musicians and I worked in Miami. That was for Mars Music, but in this case, I was in Texas. And he was driving around. We didn't open the stores till like 11 a.m. because no musicians are up before noon anyway. But so the store was closed at the time. But he was driving in some kind of French art that he had imported. It was this weird colored, brightly colored car, and he's listening to a radio show, and he hears a story about a young man who's in the hospital battling cancer. And the young man wants to learn to play guitar. So he pulls his car to the nearest music store you can find, mine, the one we were opening, or the one I was helping on in Texas. And we're closed, and he knocks on the door, and our staff is like, "Holy crap! It's the guy from ZZ Top." And so we let him in, and then he's like, "Hey," and he's like 5'2". Right? He's nothing, and he comes in, and he tells us the story, and we're like, "Hey, we're gonna help." And he's like, he got a wad of cash, and I'm like, "No, we're gonna help. What do you want?" He's like, "Well, I want to take an amp, I want to take a guitar, I want to take a strap, I want to take a couple of picks." Like, you get this man what he needs, right? So we get his stuff, and we put it in the shopping carts, and we're driving it to his car. And that's when I see his car for the first time. I'm like, "What is this?" And then he opens the back of his car, and he had Cheetos and orange soda, a bunch of it, a lot of it. And I looked at it, and I'm sure I was in shock. And I look at him, and he goes, "I like orange colored foods." And I'm like, "Okay." So we put the guitar, the amp, and the stuff in the back of his car, and he drove off. And he went to the hospital, and he didn't make a big deal of it. He didn't say, "Hey, get my my press release person out here. I want to have my picture taken with this kid who's got cancer." He just did it. And there are so many stories that tell about good people doing good things. I'm not going to share any of the ugly stories. You can point at there are plenty of those, because there were plenty of people who were like that too, believe me. But there are people like that. I remember having other musicians walk through the store, and some kid recognizes him, and he takes their picture, or plays on the drums with them, or shows them how to hold the guitar. Just in any industry, there are good people, and they're gonna show their true values, and carry themselves like that if they are good people.
So I have, and it'll be really difficult for me to convey this question. And I'm going to try to get it quite right, because you're hitting at something from an ethos perspective that I've kind of struggled with. And that is, I run into these people that you're talking about, and they're really good, genuine people, and you're really glad they're in the position that they're in, right? Because you're like, man, if that person's going to care for the staff, the waiter, the waitress, I'm really glad they're in charge of the company, or the country, or the company, or the, whatever. But then you also have these people that just that they're assholes, and they're always assholes. And you get confirmation too. You're right. They were an asshole to me, but they probably having an off day. And then you run into somebody else, and that other person's like, "Oh yeah, that asshole." And you're like, "Okay, all right, so it's not just me." They're like, "No, it's everybody. Ask anybody around. They're an asshole." And they hold from a meritocracy, hierarchical, they hold the same power, if you will, the same authority, the same seat. And it creates this dysfunction in my mind personally. The optimist in me likes to believe that the only people in power are the genuine good, and that's how they got there. We all hoisted them up, and that's why they're there, and it's beautiful. And then you have this other person that I do like to believe is a minority, but still definitely exists, that's holding the same position, yet they're a total jerk. And I wish I could understand exactly what I'm asking here, but it's kind of like, how can they both exist? Is
So
it just the world is complex and that's the answer?
there are flawed characters, and characters who choose to be flawed, but they're flawed characters, and that have been to, I would say, nurture, become flawed. Bad
Hmm.
parents, some type of uh, experience they've gone through to make them tough, or to make them not empathetic, or make them be egotistical, whatever. But look at someone. I'll do two great men. Steve Jobs, uh, uh, not a very easy guy to get along with. A person who built a great company, a great brand, a great visionary, who pushed people very hard. Who a lot of people say was a giant jackass, but he made a lot of people work harder and better and achieve things they couldn't achieve if they hadn't been through an experience of what Steve Jobs was like as a leader. And then you have somebody like Teddy Roosevelt, who is like a person who came through a lot of hardship as a young person with asthma, whose dad cared a ton about him, who nurtured him, taught him to be this well-learned kid, who then taught him and later about what was important about being physical and physicality and the importance of being a man, a true man, a boxer and an adventurer and all that. So he's a great guy who, the Teddy Roosevelt man in the arena quote is one that resonates with a lot of business people too. No one understands what it's like to be criticized. You're the man in the arena, you can take it. But then that guy wasn't a great parent to his daughters or his kids either. So there's a guy who's a great leader or whatever. Everybody's flawed in some particular way. But Teddy Roosevelt was an exceptional person, but he had trouble relating to his daughter and his son, and was also a great president, and was also maybe not a great president, depending on how you look at it and some of the things that he did. So it's interesting. I mean, there are definitely jerks who are jerks. And they're egotistical, and it's all about them, and they don't treat people well. And those are the people who treat waiters and service people like garbage. I have no time for those people. The people who they're very much about me and how they behave is probably how they behave to their kids too. And do any of that.
Thanks. That was a beautiful answer for a question that I wasn't even sure how to ask. So thank you. That's cool. So, all right. So moving along here. So what brought you to Kansas City then? I feel like that's the next evolution here and maybe we're jumping along a little bit,
Sure.
but that's kind of the next obvious question in my mind is what brought you here?
Sure.
And I would kind of like to talk about people differences too, because I just heard a speaker last night. She moved to Kansas City, and any questions, and somebody in the crowd goes, "How do you like Kansas City?" And I love what she said. She goes, "I love it here. When you invite people over, they ask, 'What can I bring?' instead of, 'Oh, I wonder what else will happen.'"
Yeah. Yeah,
And
so I'll tell you to answer the last comment first. I've had a great time in Kansas City. I ended up in joining a great group of people here who really care about this business that's under distress at this point. And I feel like the work ethic here is extremely high. And it may be related to the industry I'm in as opposed to the part of the world I'm in, but I believe it's both. The work ethic here is definitely better than I had in other places that I've worked at, the single only place out. But it definitely probably has to be a bit with the industry because I'm in the green industry. So before I came to Kansas City, I came to Kansas City in November of 22. I was in Virginia, and I spent my last 20 years of my career working for Plano Park, the direct-to-consumer catalog and an e-commerce company. I worked the first 10 years under ownership. There, the founder was still involved with the company, and 1-800-Flowers, publicly traded company, owned them. I joined them when they had almost no stores, and I had the opportunity there to design the stores along with the founder of the company and the architect team and create all the procedures, all the policies. It was a dream. So I basically got to do a retail rollout for a great brand at fun. And then the recession came in 2007, 2008, 2009, depending on how you look at how long it lasted. And the company would go for sale and was sold to a company out of Virginia called Evergreen Enterprises, and an entrepreneurial couple in the company. And they restarted the engines. They were very interested in the Plow and Heart brand, and they had a portfolio of brands that we ran together. They had a children's division and a couple other specialty catalogs. And the owners were very interested in turning those brands, so they'd like the consumer brands, and adding them to their wholesale portfolio. But they wanted to open stores too. So I had retail 2.0 opportunity with a new set of ownership to redesign stores, do store-in stores, pop-ups, change the assortment, go into new markets, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, as the expansion area. And I worked with some very talented people over there. Then COVID hit, and that could have wrecked everything. It could have dismantled the company on its own. But for whatever reason, the type of retail that we're in, specialty retail that was outdoor furniture, outdoor entertaining, home goods, and the type of retail we were running became essential retail. And our business blossomed. It bloomed. We did pretty well during COVID because we were a catalog company. I got involved at that time to supporting the call center, an area of business I had no experience in, but they asked me to take over that area. And then I also got involved in running the distribution center, a 350,000 square foot distribution center. The owners asked me to become involved in that as well.
Well, and can we pause a little bit? So you said for whatever reason, blossom, and you might, if you want to do me a favor, you might describe the business more because I'm thinking back on an interview I did with Janet Monroe, fascinating woman, built a furniture business with her husband in Canada. Absolutely thrilling, just her life and some of the stories. And if I recall, COVID struck them a very significant blow. People started ordering furniture online, and that was a very significant shift from the direction they had taken, which was they were doing hand-built furniture, but they were also building the furniture in front of you. They allowed a glass viewing panel to overlook the workshop. And they had labels on each of the stations big enough such that you could see each station that the furniture was going through and as it was being built.
That sounds cool.
And it sounds very cool. They also did like the world's largest rocking horse to try to, at a time where they were having difficulty, to try to get publicity, and they were in the Guinness Book of World Records for a year, I think, before somebody overthrew them because they put a mohawk at the top of and that mohawk, she's a little bitter about that, I think. What bitter might not even be the right word, but rightfully so, she says, what rocking horse has a mohawk? So, so then I'm curious, but yours, this industry thrives, these set of stores, which on one hand, it sounds like you're doing outdoor furniture. Maybe that's the shift because a lot of people, barbecues kind of became the thing because that's all you could really do, getting outdoors. And so
COVID created that work from home, be at home, improve your home, redo your home, make your home more complete. And we had an assortment of goods. We still have, Palm Heart is still there, an assortment of goods that's indoor and outdoor for the home that's a good brand, good value, good quality. Outdoor furniture, indoor furniture, rugs, curtains, lighting, decor. We sold a little bit of apparel, but mostly hard goods and decor. And so as COVID was going on, people were trying to entertain outside or be outside, in places where you could congregate would be outdoors. So experiential retail was clobbered. If you have a retailer like Janet's business there, where you had to go someplace and be around other people and be in experiential retail, that wasn't going to happen. But if you had direct-to-consumer business and you could ship quickly, efficiently, well, and you still managed to keep your pipeline of goods coming in, because distribution was extremely choked. The China, where the COVID scare was causing
When
closing.
lumber got destroyed.
All the factories, you couldn't get anything. Container prices went from $4,000 to $5,000 to $25,000 for the same size container, and you had to wait, just pay and wait. So everybody was, paying more, or you couldn't get it. We had our supply chain, while it was challenged, was still open, and we had a lot of goods that people were after, which was to improve your home and the quality. And so our business was okay. And we were allowed to reopen our stores if we were following all the regulations, which was a real experience. To having to test and retest and report and clean and masks and distancing and all that stuff. But we ran a call center, and in a call center, it looks like a beehive. But suddenly during COVID, you can't have a beehive. We had to have agents at home. We had to figure that out. We had to put plexiglass panels up in front of people, around people, because they're talking. So there was
There was a lot of tech requests all of a sudden, like VPNs,
Yes.
the VoIP phone. We had people that were considering VoIP phones, and I told them, it was a selling point. It was like, if you want, you can take it home. But the value of that was kind of like, we don't understand until all of a sudden everybody has to work from home. Then it was like, oh man, we need this in yesterday, please.
Yep.
And so.
And then the third leg of the stool, the stores, the call center, that was a distribution center. We had to ship the orders that we were getting. So as we were getting the orders, whether they're online or they were still on the call center. This is a hot environment. It's a warehouse. You had people still having to wear masks. You still had people who still had to go to work. They didn't have the luxury of not coming to work, nor did the retailers. They didn't have the luxury of not coming to work. They had to come to work. And
which also created this weird sort of like, you correct me if I'm wrong, but in my mind, that would create some sort of people, how do I say this? Like a culture thing, a little bit of a culture shift, right? It's like, okay, now all of a sudden we have these has and these kind of have-nots, so to speak.
It's a class. It's a class thing. You create a different class of person. We had a 350,000 square foot building with the distribution. All the front of it is empty. Those people didn't come to work. The weeks before that, all the parking spaces are full because everybody's coming to work. Now, all the parking spaces that are taken up are only the people who are coming to work in the call center or the people in the warehouse. And that feels like a class difference. Because all those other people can work at home, or they come in every once in a while. So there was some morale to address. There were some team building that had to be done. You had to express the importance of these people and how they kept the business running, because they were the ones who kept the business running.
How did you address that? Because, and a credit to you, by this point in your career, I'm getting the impression you do think a lot about the people.
Yes, that's the whole company is the people. All of it's the people. You hear it's people, it's product, and it's process. True. And people is first. If you don't have the right people, the people who care about your business, you can have the process, you can have the product, but that's not going to matter. You've got to find the right people that will care about your business, and that's not easy to do. And who will also challenge your business. You don't want people who care about your business and a bunch of yes people. You want people who come in and go, hey, we could do this differently. Why don't we do this? Or I'm going to challenge that and create that environment for those people too. Otherwise, the smart ones will leave. I'm jumping around, but that's the people part of it's important. After I was in that distribution environment for a couple of years, the how do you do it part, a lot of our management came out there to the floor, including the owners, and walked around and made themselves visible to the staff that is coming in. They made that effort. I made that effort. I was there every day, open to close, 6 a.m. I jumped in containers and unloaded containers with them because it's hot. We would get in trouble if they took their masks off. You know how terrible it is to tell somebody who's unloading a 40-foot container in the heat they can't take their masks off, but you're sitting in the air-conditioned office at 100 yards away. no way, can't do it. Cannot do it. So I went down there and helped on the line and whatever. Just be present. That is that takeaway that I was saying. Uh, don't assume they know how you feel, that you care. Show it, represent it. Try to be present and be at the point of the spear where the action is, and that demonstrates that. That makes a difference. And we had our
And this is a
problems. I mean,
much different. This is a much different. It's a much different mindset than a pizza party.
Yeah, you know,
This,
we did all the other stuff too. Yeah. We
yeah,
brought in food, we brought in water, we did all
yeah,
that, but it is much different than that. It is
yeah.
a totally different. And believe me, we had our problems too. We had people who they were working in the warehouse, and they also were the the caretaker for an elderly
Mm.
person, and they had to make a choice. You know, would they come and work with 60 of us every day where we were having outbreaks and then go home? That's tough. They had to make that choice, and so
Yeah.
we had our situations, and we dealt with them as best we could. We tried to be transparent and tried to be empathetic, and we tried to make exceptions where we could, and that kept the business going. And I give a
Well,
great
that
deal
was
of
such a
credit.
frightening time too, where it was kind of like, we were, m- my wife was pregnant at the time. And man, if it wasn't super frustrating, kind of the quantity of people that are like, "Oh, how does that affect the baby?" And it's like, don't you think that's a question we're asking daily of ourselves? And now we're getting external. It's a question, frankly, we're trying to swap under the rug because the doctors don't know how it's affecting the baby. This is all brand new stuff to all of us.
I
Um,
was I was on a very good management team, and the owner, sat in on that management team as well. And weekly, we would go over the COVID numbers, the sales numbers, but the COVID numbers, and we talk about staff. And I worked for a woman who was the CEO at the time, Parth, and I give her a lot of credit for keeping things together, communicating with the people who had to work at home too, because they had their own challenges. I mean, let's not create two classes and say that wasn't hard on them either. Now they had to work with their kids at home and still try and be productive, or share one monitor with somebody else at the house while their kids are trying to go to school. That's tough. But this leadership team talked about what was going on, and we talked about what we could do differently and better. The director of HR, the CEO, the CFO, just a great team. And we've heard challenges from different parts of our business, whether it is the photography team that had to go on site and do a shoot versus the warehouse team versus the people who were doing some light manufacturing in another one of the facilities. It was tough. It was tough, but it was rewarding in the end. And that team threw darts at each other. They closed doors and you challenged each other. And that's what makes a good leadership team, is that you can close that door and have that kind of red sky, blue sky discussion. Somebody has to be the red sky, and somebody has to talk about that blue sky, and then find some leadership that finds the right answer.
So, and I worry I cut you off a little bit from getting back to what kind of brought you into Kansas City,
Oh,
because you're still not quite at the progression of the story with the
no.
warehouse and whatnot.
No, you're right. I stopped at COVID, and so COVID changed the dynamic of that business, and the ownership decided that they were going to make some changes to what the future of the catalog business, which was severely changing coming out of COVID, and kind of retrench around the B2B wholesale business. So we started to have that discussion about let's close stores. And at that point, I had opened a lot of stores in a lot of places. And she told me her intent. She was very transparent with us as a team. And I told her I would like to be in charge of closing down the stores that had opened, negotiating out of leases, which isn't easy, and finding solutions to close stores in an organized way that gave people time. We did not surprise people. I've been in other places where, somebody shows up and to open their store and the lock doesn't work, and they're told, hey, we decided to close location A. We didn't do that. We told our locations what we were doing. We met with them. They knew ahead of time as we were doing it. We helped people find jobs if they needed jobs, and then we started closing them. And so I did that for the last few years while I was also supporting the call center and supporting the distribution center. At that point, we had put two different directors in there, and I was still supporting them. And after I closed a lot of my locations, which was heartbreaking, I told the owner that I'm going to be looking for my next adventure, and I wanted to find something that was experiential in retail, and we continue to learn. But I wanted to be in retail. I wanted to come to an organization where I could make an impact, and this one got in front of me. DCA.
So you were seriously passionate about retail,
I
not
love
but
it.
but storefront, the whole experience.
Yeah, I like it. I love it. And it's certainly the e-com side of it and the marketing side of it, and learning new KPIs. I mean, as I told you, I started when there were registers that you pushed in buttons, and now I have registers that are touchscreens and mobile and iPads and handhelds. I started when we didn't have mobile phones. We had pagers, then we had mobile phones, and all of that has changed a ton with the internet. And so I love all of it. I've had a great ride learning about retail and all of that. So yeah, I really enjoy it.
So what are your thoughts of this internet experience then, where it just gets, at every time you're thinking, no, this thing can't, I need it pretty quickly. Now you have scenarios, right, where drones from a local distribution site
I,
50 miles away or whatever are bringing it to your doorstep within a couple hours or whatever. I don't know. And it seems like they just keep shrinking that and shrinking that. As soon as we discover portals, I'm sure they're going to find some way to just shove it through a mini portal and have you like, haha, my merchandise.
the internet's great. It's here to stay. It's part of being what a good retailer is and presenting an experience. It's omni-channel. I have a web page here that I manage, and an interface that'll be managed for trying to get e-commerce business out of it. We have an events group that's a different type of retail e-com experience here too. So we do lots of events, but I like it. I've learned a lot about it. There are a lot of KPIs that are similar to you got them to the page, but that they convert. That's conversion. That they check out with one item or three items. That's AOV or IPT for the average order value, or items per transaction. Website traffic. That's traffic. The same traffic that you try and drive by marketing to a store. Sales equals that traffic times AOV times conversion. That's that metric, and it's the same whether you're online or whether you're in the bricks. So I like it. I am probably not a master of that. I'd love to be in a situation where I could continue to learn more about what's now happening with AI. Agentic checkout is now the new thing that's happening.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. I don't know how cool.
And unless I'm wrong, but I think what you're talking about for more the audience, I guess. But when you say agentic checkout, that's you've found this thing, you went to checkout. Actually, a buddy of mine gives the example: you put skis in the cart, right, and you're at checkout, and as you're at checkout, there's like, oh, by the way, did you know most people buy these skis with this ski mask and this jacket and this? That's the agentic checkout you're describing, correct?
So no, that
Hmm.
isn't the true agentic checkout. So agentic is using AI to sell to make your shopping experience complete.
Hmm.
So you would be on Perplexity or ChatGPT, and
Yep.
it knows and it learns about you as a consumer. And
Yep.
it now knows that something you're interested in, a cool new microphone, is available from X. And so
Yep.
it knows to put it in front of you. Or if you put in front of you a mic that you're looking for, it knows because of what else you shop for that, you should get these types of cables, or maybe you should look at these headphones. And by the way, it knows that it's your dog's birthday next week, so you should get something for your dog while you're doing it at the same time. Agentic, so it is using AI to learn about the consumer, and make that experience seamless, no friction. I mean, no friction is what you're looking for in any of the retail pieces. Freight is friction. Charging a lot of freight. Free freight is no friction. So that's easy to do. Now, a lot of the people who have been fulfilling orders are having to put freight back in, because that kind of no friction beats a P&L to hell. Eventually, you can't be on Amazon forever. Maybe Amazon can, but the rest of us haven't figured that out. So it reduces friction and makes it easier for that to happen. But it learns about you while it's learning to reduce friction, which is scary in its own way. So I'm still learning. I'm learning all the time. There's some really smart people who have podcasts about business and retail that I listen and I follow through. And if I'm working out or I'm doing something, I'm like, what did he just say? Or she just say? Let me rewind it and I write it down, and then I go in and research it, because I'm like, wow, I didn't even know you could do that, or the people doing that now and whatever. So always be curious is an important thing. We're going to keep learning, and that's a great thing.
Pixel retargeting has been a fascinating
Yes.
concept to me in business. And we all kind of knew, we all kind of suspected. I go to this website and then I see an ad on Facebook. How does that happen? And then you read it's pixel retar. It's the notion that you specifically fed over to Facebook that they visited us, and now I want to pay for ads on your platform to hit this person on occasion and say, whatever you say, right? I mean, most people fill out the standard ads. I kind of want to see one still that says, "Hey, I noticed you visited my website, but you didn't buy.
Yeah.
What was up? Do I need to call you personally? I'm willing to do that." It's like I haven't had one quite that bold, but
Yeah,
anyway,
that retargeting, abandoned shopping cart is a metric,
yep.
right? So that's a cool thing. And then that retargeting, that whether it's pixel or whatever, is an interesting thing too. To go back and try and find a customer. Obviously they had the affinity. They ended up at your website, or they did look at your email or something. So you've got to retarget them, try to get them back. They were on TikTok, so let's retarget them from TikTok to bring them to the website. It's very, very interesting.
Well, it's a bit of, it's going to sound odd. So, I mean, on one hand, now that I've been on the other side, I don't necessarily mind some of these ads. I've even bought some products from ads as much, right? Because it's like the algorithm is specifically trying to give me something that I want. Why is that a problem, right? That's what I want. It's there. And I may not have known it existed at all if they didn't spend the time, effort, and energy to be like, here's Sam. Here's what Sam wants. Now let's get in front of Sam, because this is what Sam wants. Flip side, though, is I have this moment where it's like, how do our wallets stand a chance
Yeah.
when you and I are just putting our heads together, and smarter people with way deeper pockets, and it's an ever evolving flow to like commerce, get money. The more money flows, the better. We went from a world where a penny saved is a penny earned. People used to have sellers with a year's worth of food and a bank account, and then when they progressed out of sellers, it's like, what's the point of a seller? Let's just have a year's worth of bank account. Into a world where Um, it's like it's easy to say, "Oh, we're spoiled. We need our daily coffee." It's hard to say we have a system that's very targeted. It's, we go into I love watching some of the clips you're probably describing where the guy talks about if you're a coffee shop, one of the best things you can do is make very public that you're open. Front door swung open, very massive open sign, and as I've gone to establishments, I've started digging into that in my brain. Like I've establishments that are open 7 days a week, for example, versus ones that are closed on Sunday and Monday. And I get that Monday is probably very slow for retail. Sure, they save that money, but I've noticed the first time I roll up on a Monday, and me and Paul, we're supposed to have a business meeting, and it's closed, I don't go back typically. And what's worse is I have a tendency to default to chains because I know the chains are open. I'm not going to be embarrassed with Paul, like, hey, I've rolled up and this place is closed. Let's find a different place to have our business meeting. And so, anyway, the point there is, how do our wallets stand a chance?
People want everything now, which is different than I want more assortment and 2 day, 3 day shopping or whatever. So the new version of that is everything now. All right, so you got to do um, fulfillment same day, 2 hours, use multiple distribution centers, 3PLs, whatever that makes that happen. And then I don't think is going to change. I think the thing about what you were saying about you don't go to that place because the other place is going to be dependable. That's the endless availability of options that the consumers have in the U.S. versus other places where you have 15 coffee shops, or you can get your books from someplace in Oregon as easily as you can get a book from someplace in Kansas City, and it will still be there the next day from either one of those two places. Just endless availability, so there's no loyalty to brand because you can find the next brand as easily as that. The other thing I jotted down I wanted to say is the psychology of making people do things, the nudge factor. That's a great, that science of trying to get people to behave in a certain way. Yeah, you don't stand a chance because that psychology is great. But in retail before, we were still doing those things. I mean, Kako Underhill is a great uh, business guy who talks about how to make people do things in retail environments. Why We Buy is his famous book. We talk about why women's categories on the left side of the store versus men's categories are on the right side of the store, or the proper distancing between aisles, because if you touch someone's butt with your butt, you instantly abandon the product, called the butt touch principle. That psychology has always existed. It's always existed. And so we've always been marketing to people, trying to get them to buy something when they don't stand a chance if they end up at the store. This is just a new way of doing that now that you've got the ability to market to people 24 hours a day while you're sleeping, and now you're in the bathroom or while you're at work even, and close the deal. It's interesting. It's cool. It's fascinating.
There's a beautiful, far before the Alexa, there's a beautiful presentation with Jeff Bezos in front of a college. And I'm not going to forget this and I don't even fully know. I think it was some online clip. And I was like, I've got to watch the full lecture. And it's early on in Jeff Bezos' career with Amazon. And he is presenting to a college and he's just talking about the early days of Amazon and the evolution. And he states that the number one impulse buy that he's noticed at Amazon is kitchen related utensils and items. And he says, if there is some way we could ever get a computer in the kitchen, that'll be the next thing.
Yeah.
And, you fast forward to the Alexa and the Dot, and where is it? And how easy is it to say, order me a blender you know, because that's, and it makes sense. We're all cooking and we learned the hard way that it's like, if only I had this strainer to do this thing for this thing, and then you ask it and it'll order it and it'll be on its way.
Yeah, the ability for agentic selling like that is good, right? It knows that you like to cook, and it knows that you're reading a book about traveling to Morocco. So it's going to suggest something that's like, hey, you know what? This would be a cool thing to do. Get order this meal plan or something. It's scary, but it's. I also find it fascinating and scary. I belong to every loyalty club. I freely give my email. I accept all cookies. I don't care. I figure it out. I don't care, and I'm not a huge consumer, but so I don't really care. But I just like to see what's thrown at me.
Yeah. Yep. And it's fascinating just how many people and this is still what I'm trying to figure out. But you start to learn it's like you can do it like everybody else. And on one hand, there's a reason everybody else is doing it. On the other hand, marketing doesn't work too well when you do it like everybody else.
Right. Right.
Okay, so now, I mean, we're gonna have to wrap this thing up at some point, but I also feel like you got to talk a little bit more about DCA Outdoor
Sure.
and what you're doing currently. So,
Yep.
if you want to kind of get that bit in there and catch us up on in Kansas City, then we'll kind of move to
Yeah.
wrap up.
Yeah, I came to this organization specifically. I run the division that one of the divisions I run is called Colonial Gardens, which is an independent garden center. We've been voted one of the top 100 independent garden centers the last 2 years in a row. We just got that recognition here this last week. I heard for the second year, but it is a traditional garden center in the sense that it has the garden center categories like a nursery and annuals, all the plants, the pottery, books related to gardening. And so that's the business that was bought here by the owner back in 2016, and then was converted into what is going to be a agritourism and experiential garden center and that other piece. So the garden center sits on 40 acres on one side of the road, and on the other side of the road, we have 40 acres of apple trees, peaches, apricots. We have brambles, so we have raspberries, blackberries, blueberries. They're just coming. Our first bee pick will start Saturday, actually. Um, and we have a cut flower field with plant pumpkins. We'll put a hemp maze back there. We'll hold festivals. So that agritourism side is there. We also have livestock that we run here in a rotational pasture, not for really for the purpose of letting people see what farm looks like, not that we're monetizing the animals. We do harvest the animals because it's a working farm. Those animals end up on the plates. And some of our guests' plates as well. We have chickens, we collect eggs. So that's part of that experience over there too. They have a playground at the front of it, so people can come and spend the day and the festival with us. And on this side of the garden center, uh, to add to the non-traditional part of the garden center, we added a music stage. So we have live music performances here weekly, free ones so people can come. We've built $1 million cafe food operation in the center of the garden center that's got an open air courtyard and dining areas connected to it as well. And then we built a community room so that the community can have meetings here, or we can do workshops. So the experiential part is the other piece that is different than the traditional garden center. Most garden centers business is 60% of it would be in March, April, May, and June, depending on which zone the garden center is in, but 3 months generally. And the rest of the year, there isn't a lot of business. And for us, what we try and do is create a festival season in June, July, fall. We pick where people can come and pick their own apples and spend the day trying to do a variety of different events that are for adults and for children alike. And we are doing things that are very cool, that are fun, which is why them to come here. They're fun to take for dinners, fun. We do mystery dinners where we bring actors in, there'd be 100 people here trying to figure out who done it. Or we'll
When
do
I really enjoyed the when we visited, I really enjoyed the seeming synergy around, yes, the experiential, yes, the farming, but also like we're not the only ones doing the farming. We're bringing in other individuals that are testing out, can this work here? And then the grazing patterns. This isn't like Paul, this is how a grazing pattern should work. This is other people
exactly.
experimenting with what's the ideal grazing pattern for. So it to me it almost came out, and I hope this is a compliment, as it's like it's this weird sort of, in the best of ways, this experience, but also a lab, and then a lab that you get to experience. Because how many of us get that opportunity to visit and see, whoa, okay, so that won't grow in this season typically, or that will grow in this season typically, or maybe we get lucky and we miss the early freeze. So the apricots, you were talking about, you're experimenting a little bit with apricots.
Yeah.
And
The site is definitely a passion project for the owner. So this business is the only business that's customer, it's B2C or directly to consumer facing. The rest of our business is full sale, distribution, production. We're one of the largest growers of trees in the U.S. We produce a lot of material and have farms all over the U.S. So this place, the intent of it, this is a garden center we used to visit when he was a little boy. He bought it because he wanted to turn it into a showpiece that's very unique and to also showcase the other parts of the company. So we have a great nursery here filled with nursery stock because we're actually a vertically integrated garden center as a grower. And there are others out there too. But the other part of it you won't find is that regenerative agriculture is part of what we're trying to share and teach, and it's part of our brand. And so that's also resident here for people to experience. And this garden center has a curated market, as you mentioned. So we have a liquor license, and we could throw liquors on the shelf, we could put wine on the shelf, but we choose who we put on the shelves. They're either local brewers and winemakers and distillers, or there are wines and other beverages here that are legit. They're vineyard, so this is they show the same brand and values as we do. But the rest of the market, we've got honeys and small vendors that are Missouri and Kansas vendors of a variety of food products, cookies, chips, nuts, all kinds of stuff. So it's a very unique garden center and experience here. And we've been working on it. The parent company, as I said, is very large. We have farms in Missouri and Kansas and Illinois and probably overgrown and out of material. We believe we have a proven process to create a better quality of tree and shrub that is going to survive. Than you can find in other places. There were big box stores, certainly, but we believe that some of the work that we're doing in terms of putting the product in these packages that we're creating is doing so much for the root structure of the trees and plants that we're selling, that it creates a survivability and a quality for the customer that they can't find in other places. And we're trying to change the industry with some of that. And we are going through our growing pains, and we are going through bankruptcy and we're going through a restructuring. This company grew very fast. We went out and got a lot of credit to build the company. And we've had a challenging last year in 24 and the end of 23 too, where we have not been able to get cash out of the company and monetize our revenue in order to continue to fund our growth or to pay down our debt. And so we are going now through restructuring that happened in February 21. We finished that first 13-week period with, I would say, very positive results. And we are now entering what will be the second 13-week worried about and continue to work on a better longer term restructuring plan with you. And there will probably be some painful changes along the way because there needed to be. And as long as this management team, this ownership team can find reason in what we're seeing, because we are passionate about what we do, but you have to sometimes kill some sacred cows. That then we should be on the other side of this, and that's going to be a struggle. But I mentioned earlier on, I arrived here with a ton of subject matter experts around me because I did not come from this industry. I don't know anything about trees and animals and shrubs and manuals and or livestock for that matter. Not much. And I was surrounded with some very intelligent, passionate, hardworking people who care about this company. This thing had great things, still does, and that's what we hope that we can build on and put this thing on the right path.
That's great. So as we start to wrap up here, Paul, we have two questions that we like to ask folks. So we have a motto around here, and the motto is, if we have seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. Who's been a giant in your life that you'd like to pay homage to in this moment?
There are a lot of people. I think, in my early career, of course, my first manager, district manager, but I worked with a couple of CEOs and the founder at Flower Park. That those three taught me different things in different ways about people, about brand, about the process. Peter Rice was founder of Compaq. He's an icon and marketing world. I'd say he taught me a lot. And then John Haydock and Leslie Newton, two CEOs I worked at different people at different periods of time. John was them that taught me about leading people and talking to people, and he, his moniker of assume positive intent. And that has helped me a lot because sometimes you get very defensive, and if I assume positive intent on what other people are doing, it breaks that down. And Leslie Newton was a very good leader and communicator, and a person who showed me how to care about people in crisis. And she led us through that COVID group I mentioned, and also a very smart person on the finance side. And those three people, I'll say they were very good.
The other question is, if you were to give kind of a general rule of thumb or a pithy saying that you've found to be true again and again and again in your life, what would it be?
That those three things are always be curious, invest in yourself, and don't be a cynic.
Don't be a cynic?
Don't be a cynic.
Like
Always be curious, invest in yourself, take the time to learn, and find new ways to challenge yourself in a good way, a positive way. And don't be a cynic. And it sucks to be someone who's a negative person, and that just destroys teams. Don't be a cynic.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining me today, Paul.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. Really enjoyed the conversation today, and I also got a chance to get to know you when we went and did that dinner together. I really enjoyed that too. So thank you.
It's great. My pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to thank you for listening to today's episode. It's such a blessing to be able to interview such fantastic individuals. If you're interested in listening to more, we look to post every Thursday at 10 a.m. You can find us on YouTube, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much. Have a blessed day.